brain has been so mushy. Where is it? Why are you looking at me like that? Okay. Today is Tuesday, and it feels like a Tuesday. I've had a really bad cold for the last couple of weeks, and it's the kind of congestion where it feels like there's two sticks sticking out of the backs of your eyeballs, and inside of your head there's like a little guy holding on to those sticks, and every time you try to look one direction or the other, it's like he's pushing the opposite way. Maybe that's not a universal experience. Anyway, I'm finally starting to feel a little bit better, and now that I'm out of bed and up and doing things, I'm so far behind on everything that I need to get done. Currently, I'm in the middle of a pretty big editing project, and I'm about a week behind schedule of where I would like to be, but thankfully it's not a paid client. It's just a favor for someone that I know. My brain has been so mushy for the last couple of weeks that I think if I'd tried to start on this project any earlier, I would have had to go back and start over once I was better anyway. So that's the big thing on my plate right now. I've also got a few other little things that I want to work on. I'm in the middle of crocheting a baby blanket that I'm hoping to get done by the end of this week. And as usual, I'm trying to do some reading. Currently, I'm about halfway through Ray Naylor's The Mountain and the Sea. I hate this version of the cover. This is the much better one. I think it's the UK edition. Oh, there's a hummingbird out there. Hello. This is a fairly far future speculative fiction novel about a team of scientists who are investigating the possibility of having discovered a sentient octopus. This particular species of octopus seems to be able to communicate with something resembling language and symbols, and seems to exist in a sort of community, almost like early human beings did. I found this in one of the curated lists that the librarians at my local library put together in Libby. I can't remember exactly what the list was for. I think it was either horror or science fiction titles with some specific niche. I don't remember. I placed the hold a long time ago. Rosie, you're staring at me. Okay. It asks a lot of questions that I really enjoy exploring in science fiction, like, what is intelligence? How do we define it? Is there a way to define intelligence without using humans as a reference point? Is there such a thing as non-human intelligence, or to characterize intelligence, do we have to completely separate it from the idea of human intelligence? Things like that. I do worry at some points that it's kind of falling into anthropomorphizing intelligence a little bit too much. Like, it's saying a species can only be intelligent if it does X, Y, and Z that humans do, because humans are an intelligent species. And I think that that can be kind of a limiting way to look at things. I think the gold standard exploration of incredibly non-human, unfamiliar intelligence would be something like the Strugatsky Brothers' Roadside Picnic, which I know I've talked about before. In that book, the aliens are so alien that even though there's contact, we never communicate with them. There's no way that the characters are able to interface with them because they are so different from us. So maybe reading that book kind of spoiled me a little bit for this discussion, because I feel like the Strugatsky Brothers' take on what intelligence is something that I don't see explored in quite that way very often in science fiction. But so far, The Mountain and the Sea has been very good. I love the characters. There's a lot of interesting discussions about robotics and androids and AI and what sentience means and what consciousness means. It's been slow going getting through the very beginning of this book, but that's not because it's not good. It's just because I've been so sick. But I'm hoping to make some pretty significant progress on it in the next couple of days, and hopefully pick up a few other books to read. I'd love to get into some poetry. I don't think I've picked up a poetry book for any extended length of time, maybe at all, this year. So this week is mostly going to be playing catch up a little bit, hopefully getting that big editing project done, doing some crafts, seeing some birds. Should be good. And I don't think I can stall any longer on getting anything done by talking, so let's get to it. Oh. Well, that didn't have the intended effect. Today is Friday, and I am sitting on the floor, as one does. Figured I would hop back on here and do a little talking segment since it's been a minute. I don't really have a ton of updates to provide. Unfortunately, the last couple days have been besieged by migraines. I went to the dentist yesterday, and the hygienists at my dentist always wear a little tiny headlamp, and every time they turn their heads back and forth like this, the light like flashes across my eyes, and I try to shut my eyes. I always wear sunglasses, but unfortunately I have photosensitivity, and it almost always triggers a migraine. So yesterday I spent most of the day in bed. After a lot of praying and sleeping and those sorts of things, I was able to get back up last night, and I managed to get through a good chunk of the editing project that I'm working on. Cat hair on the microphone. I'm almost finished with the first novel of the 3 in the series, and the other 2 are a little bit shorter. So once I get through this one, I should be able to progress through the other 2 pretty quickly. These are fantasy novels, which I always consider a slightly different animal than other editing projects, because you have to sort of create your own glossary of terms that are specific to the work, and a lot of times authors will have very specific stylistic approaches to things like voice and word choice that depend on the setting and the characters and things like that. Obviously there's some elements of that in any edit. Everybody has their own specific style and every work is different. But with fantasy, I think you have to pay special attention to how the author creates the world by creating words. This project isn't quite on the level of something like Dune, where you have like a actual glossary at the end of the book to define everything, but there are specific terms that I have to make sure are consistent throughout the work. So that's going to be the thing that I really have to keep the closest eye on. Thankfully, this project has been through a couple of other editors, and I'm kind of doing like a final gloss over, so there's not a ton of work to be done. It's mostly mechanical corrections, and I really enjoy doing that because I can just kind of sink into the work and coast in the arms of my beloved Chicago Manual of Style. So that's been good so far. I haven't gotten any crocheting done. That doesn't usually play very well with my migraines, but hopefully I'll be able to do some of that today. I was hoping to be able to sit out on the deck and work on the blanket a little bit, but it is so hot today, and working on a blanket in the summertime in Florida, even though it's only May, it's the summertime in Florida, it just gets way too hot, and so I'm probably not going to be doing that. Hopefully I'll be able to get an audiobook or something and sit down tonight and make some progress on it. Reading-wise, not a ton to update either. I'm still really enjoying The Mountain and the Sea. As I've gotten a little bit further into it, I'm kind of continuing to be concerned that Naylor's approach to defining intelligence is very much centralized on what human intelligence is. But I'm hoping as the story progresses, he'll kind of subvert this idea that he's set up and come out saying something really interesting about what intelligence can be. One of the main characters of the book, Evram, is an android, and they are defined as sort of their own kind of thing. There's nothing else in the world that's like them that exists. And there are a lot of questions about how Evram's intelligence functions and if they're conscious and that sort of thing. And I'm hoping that as things progress, Naylor will kind of use Evram's difference as a vehicle to explore the potential differences between human consciousness and the octopus consciousness that he's setting up. Anyways, maybe I'm putting too many of my own hopes on this book, but we'll see how it goes. I'm enjoying it. It's entertaining either way. I mentioned earlier in the week that I really want to pick up some poetry this week as well because I haven't read any this year. I decided last night that I was going to pick up Wendy Cope's Serious Concerns. I've had this on my bookshelf for a while. My favorite poem of Cope's is The Orange. It's actually my favorite poem of all time. And this is I think this is the book that one comes from. Yeah, it's in this one. I really enjoy Cope's poetry. I know some people think it's a little bit simple or trite, but I don't think that at all. I think it's beautifully representative of human emotion and thought and feelings of joy and humor. I think we can often be dismissive of expressions of positive emotion in art because we've been taught that struggle is central to plot progression and things like that. But just as things like violence and grief are part of the human experience, joy and forgiveness and peace and contentment are also part of the human experience. And if art is going to be representative of the human experience as a whole, it needs to represent those things too. Anyway, wow, that was a little bit deep for me to get talking about a poem about an orange. Anyway, other than that, I've also been doing a little bit of Bible study. I grew up in church and I have done a lot of Bible study in my life, but as an adult with a fully developed brain, I haven't really taken the time to dive in and use my literary analysis skills and my critical thinking skills to go through the texts that I've been raised on. Currently, I'm working through the New Testament, the New King James Version. I've never sat down and read it from start to finish. I've always read in pieces, and getting to appreciate the Bible as a literary work is a really different experience than how I grew up with it, and it's been really interesting so far. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I recently read the chapter of Acts where Peter has the vision from the Lord where he brings down the sheet from heaven that has all of the quote unquote unclean foods on it. And the Lord says to Peter, do not call common what I have called clean. Obviously in the scripture, this was a figurative representation of the Lord telling Peter to accept the Gentile men that were coming to him to seek the gospel. But I think that we can also look at it as God's message that we need to accept everyone. With the appointment of a new pope just happening, I'm not Catholic, but I've been following it closely because, oh man, I enjoyed conclave so much. But with the appointment of a new pope and his message of inclusion yesterday, I've just been thinking a lot about how important it is that we include everyone, that we love everyone. That's what the church is for. The only time we're going to have a big enough table is when there's always another seat. So that's been my other big literary adventure recently. I really feel like I'm getting a lot out of it. If you're religious, or if you're not religious and you've never sat down and gone through these texts that have such a huge influence on our world, I highly recommend it because you might find something in there that you don't think is in there, that nobody's ever told you is in there, and maybe that somebody has told you isn't in there. So they're definitely worth exploring. And that's definitely something I've been enjoying lately. Today, the sun is back out and my weather system and flashing light induced migraine has passed on, hopefully completely. I hope so. I'm going to pop over to my desk and chug along on the rest of that first novel. Hopefully I'll be able to do some other reading this afternoon and make some progress on that craft project that I have not touched this week. It's such a beautiful day though. Honestly, I'm probably going to be looking out the window most of the day. The trees are so green right now and the sun is just gorgeous. It's a beautiful day. Thanks for hanging out with me. Did you guys know that iMovie makes like a Mario Kart countdown noise before it starts? Is that a new feature? Have I just never used it with the sound on? Anyway, welcome back. It's been a few days since we last talked, and I just wanted to come back on here and kind of sum up where we've been this week and what we got done and where we might be going. I still haven't finished either of the projects that I set out to work on this week, the editing project and the baby blanket, but the important thing is that I've made progress. I've got 2 out of the 3 novels done, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through the blanket. The thing about those deadlines that I set for myself, that I wanted to finish those things this week, is that they're self-imposed deadlines, which means I can have some wiggle room in that if I need it. I think it's important for us to give ourselves some grace when it comes to finishing things on the timelines that we've made up for ourselves, especially when we're unwell or we need to give ourselves a little extra space to get something done. Most important thing to remember is that all progress is progress, even if it's slow progress. But even though I didn't hit the exact benchmarks that I set for myself, I'm still happy with what I got done. I'm moving along and I'm doing good work, and that's what really matters. This has been something that's been kind of hard for me to learn as an adult, because when I was a kid, I was very much that one student that had things done a week out from when they were supposed to be turned in, and I was very on top of everything. And unfortunately, doing that for a long, long time burns you out. And then you have to kind of recalibrate and figure out what you're capable of and what a healthy pace is for you to work at. And that's definitely something that I'm still working on figuring out, but I think I'm getting a better and better handle on it as I get older and I practice more and more. Every time I experience a perceived failure against some sort of expectation that I've set for myself, that's really just an opportunity for me to assess what I need in that moment and how I can move forward and do things differently and better in the future. But enough about all that. Let's talk about some books. I finished The Mountain and the Sea, and I can honestly say that it's probably going to be in my top 5 or 10 favorite books of the year already, even though it's only May. It did unfortunately fall into some of the traps of being too attached to human ideals when it comes to defining intelligence, but I feel like that's literally only a problem for me because that's something that I'm obsessed with in science fiction. Even though the book didn't exactly go in the direction that I wanted it to go, I think Naylor still made a lot of really interesting and important points about how we define intelligence and what difference looks like in something that we have really strong definitional boundaries around. I also learned a new word when I was reading through the list of books he consulted in the acknowledgments, and that's biosemiotics. So you can believe that I'm going to go into the deepest Wikipedia hole you have ever seen trying to figure that out. I'll definitely have more to say about The Mountain and the Sea when I do my wrap up for May. It's probably going to be an April, May, June wrap up. I kind of like the quarterly model, but for now I can honestly say that it was a very good book. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'd like to read some more of what Naylor's written. I've been thinking a lot about who I would recommend this book to, and the really specific categories I've come up with are people who get upset when they see octopus on the menu, people who had to read a lot of Saussure in college, people who think a lot about how animals would talk to us if they could, people who are really interested in AI but not the ChatGPT kind, folks who loved data in Star Trek: The Next Generation. That's me. And also my mom, because I already told her that she needed to read this book and she got the audiobook from the library a couple days ago. So yeah, really good science fiction read. I've also made some progress in Wendy Cope's Serious Concerns, and I'm really enjoying how lighthearted a lot of the poems are in here, and Cope's absolute mastery over simple, witty turns of phrase. The rhythm of her poems is so satisfying to read, and I think she has a lot to say about the people who look down on her for the simplicity of her work. Simplicity can be an absolutely beautiful thing, and I think a lot of times it's harder to achieve simplicity in a meaningful way than it is to achieve complexity. There's one poem in the collection called Serious Concerns, which is the title poem of the collection, and in it Cope responds to a couple of her critics. Where is it? Cope quotes one of her critics who is sort of condescendingly saying that she only writes to amuse, as if that's a bad thing, and she responds in verse to this line, saying, "Write to amuse? What an appalling suggestion. I write to make people anxious and miserable and to worsen their indigestion." And I think a lot of modern writers are doing that without realizing that they're doing it, because we've been taught so often that negative emotions are the more powerful ones and the more striking ones. Sometimes you just want to read a little poem and have a little giggle and learn something profound at the same time. And all of those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. But in any case, I'm finding serious concerns really delightful. I'm reading a few poems before bed every night, and it just always kind of puts a smile on my face. But yeah, I think that might be all of the updates I have at this time. I hope you enjoyed getting to follow me around a little bit as I puttered around in and out of my editing cave. Let me know in the comments if you're reading anything good right now. As I've said before, my TBR is constantly expanding, and with your help, it might one day reach the singularity. Thanks for being here. I love you. I'm glad I exist.